When my boss told me I had the skills to keep 3 distribution centers alive but not the executive presence to lead them, I thanked him for the feedback, slid my resignation letter across the conference table, and went home before lunch. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask him to reconsider. I did not remind him that I had spent 6 years solving the emergencies he took credit for. I simply left. The following Monday, when I turned my phone back on, I had 67 missed calls, 14 voicemails marked urgent, and a text from the company president that said, "Maya, whatever happened between you and Grant, we need you in the building now." My name is Maya Ellis. I was 29 years old, and until that Friday morning, I was the regional fulfillment manager for a food distribution company outside Kansas City called Northstar Provisioning. Northstar supplied restaurants, school districts, hospitals, and several grocery chains across Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. On paper, my job was to supervise one warehouse and support 2 others. In reality, I was the person people called when a freezer failed at 2 in the morning, when a truck jackknifed on Interstate 70 during an ice storm, when a supplier missed a poultry shipment before Thanksgiving, or when a grocery buyer threatened to cancel a $6 million account because someone in sales had promised delivery windows our routes could not support. I had started at Northstar at 23 as an inventory analyst with a used Honda, a business degree I was still paying off, and the kind of personality that made people hand me problems because they knew I would not let them drop. At first, I liked being that person. I liked walking into a mess and finding the thread that could pull it straight. I liked building schedules, training supervisors, learning which drivers could handle bad weather, which vendors always answered after hours, which maintenance contractors actually showed up when they said they would, and which clients cared more about honesty than excuses. Over time, though, dependable became available, and available became expected. By 27, I was handling work 2 levels above my title while still being told I needed more seasoning. By 28, I had written the continuity playbook for all 3 regional warehouses, but my name appeared on the document only in the revision history. My boss, Grant Hollis, presented it to senior leadership as a department initiative. I knew what he was doing, but I also knew the rule I had spent most of my life following: keep the peace, do good work, and eventually people will notice. My mother loved that rule. Growing up, whenever my older brother got angry, she told me to be the reasonable one because you're easier to talk to. Whenever my father forgot something important, I was the one who reminded him, then quietly accepted his thanks as if I had not spent years becoming the family's unpaid calendar, mediator, and cleanup crew. Even after I moved out, my mother would say, "You've always been the strong one, honey. Strong people don't need applause." I used to think that was a compliment. By the time Grant called me into the conference room that Friday, I had finally learned that sometimes people praise your strength because it lets them justify giving you less. The senior director of regional operations position had opened after our previous director retired. For 8 months, I had been doing half the job unofficially. Grant had encouraged me to apply. He told me my application was a formality. 2 vice presidents told me I was the obvious internal candidate. One of our largest clients, Summit Market Group, had even written a letter praising the winter emergency protocol I designed after a blizzard shut down highways the year before. I went into that meeting expecting a serious conversation about compensation and transition. Instead, Grant folded his hands and said, "Maya, nobody is questioning your work ethic, but leadership at that level is about more than being the person who fixes things. You need presence. You need polish. You need to look like someone people naturally follow." I remember staring at him and thinking how strange it was to hear that from a man who had called me from his vacation in Cabo because he could not figure out which warehouse had backup generator capacity. Then he smiled like he was giving me good news. "We're going with Evan Price." Evan was 32, had been with Northstar for 14 months, and had never run a warehouse. He worked in corporate planning. He wore expensive quarter zips, used phrases like strategic alignment in meetings, and knew how to turn other people's work into slides that made senior executives nod. He was not stupid. That almost would have been easier. Evan was smart enough to understand a problem once someone else had already solved it. He was also smart enough to know that credit was a currency, And unlike me, he never gave any away. Grant continued, "The upside is Evan really respects your operational knowledge. He wants you to stay in your current role and help him get up to speed. You'll be critical to his success." That was the moment something in me went quiet. Not angry, not broken. Quiet. For years, I had been telling myself that if I just worked a little harder, explained a little better, stayed a little later, I would finally reach the point where no one could overlook me. Sitting there, I realized I had already reached that point. They were not overlooking me. They were looking directly at my value and deciding they could keep using it without rewarding it. So I opened the leather folder I had carried into the room, took out the resignation letter I had drafted 2 weeks earlier after hearing rumors about Evan, and placed it in front of Grant. His eyebrows lifted. "What's this?" he asked. "My resignation," I said. "Effective today." Evan actually laughed once, a short, nervous sound. "Come on, Maya. Don't make this emotional." I looked at him and said, "I'm not emotional. I'm making a staffing decision." Then I stood, wished them luck, and walked out. I spent the next hour doing something that surprised almost everyone who heard about it later. I completed a proper handoff. I did not delete a file. I did not change a password. I did not lock anyone out. I did not forward client information to myself or sabotage a route or touch anything I was not entitled to touch. I emailed Grant, Evan, HR, and the warehouse supervisors a list of active issues, current vendor contacts, weather alerts, maintenance tickets, staffing gaps, and the location of every continuity document my team used. I attached the winter emergency playbook. I specifically highlighted the section dealing with multi-site power loss and cold storage failure. Then I turned in my badge and company laptop, hugged 2 supervisors who looked like they might cry, and walked out to the parking lot with one cardboard box containing a framed picture of my younger sister, a pair of running shoes, and a ceramic mug that said, "I fix problems you don't know you have." I almost laughed at the mug when I put it on the passenger seat. My phone started ringing before I pulled onto the highway. First, Grant, then Evan, then HR, then Grant again. I turned the sound off. 10 minutes later, my mother called. I answered because I had made the mistake of mentioning the promotion to her earlier that week. "Grant called your father," she said without saying hello. That was not as strange as it sounds. My father had once played golf with Grant at a charity tournament, and Grant had the habit of treating casual acquaintances like lifelong friends whenever it benefited him. "He said you quit over a promotion." I told her, "I quit after they made it clear they wanted my work but not my leadership." She sighed the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. "Maya, sweetheart, jobs aren't fair. You don't walk away from stability because your feelings are hurt." I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in the car for a moment before answering. "My feelings aren't hurt. Then go back Monday and work it out." "No." There was silence on the other end. My mother was not used to hearing that word from me without an explanation attached. "Maya, don't be stubborn." "Maya, don't be stubborn. Evan gets the job. You can still help him while you figure out your next move." I looked through the windshield at my building and understood, suddenly, how similar my family and my workplace had become in my mind. Both had trained me to confuse being needed with being valued. Both got uncomfortable when I stopped making things easier. "I already figured out my next move," I said. "I'm going upstairs." Then I ended the call. My younger sister, Tessa, was staying with me for the weekend while her college dorm underwent repairs, and when I walked into the apartment carrying my box, she looked from my face to the box and said, "You actually did it?" Tessa was 20, observant, and far less impressed by authority than I had been at her age. I had told her about the rumors. She had spent 2 weeks saying, "If they give that job to the PowerPoint guy, you should leave." Now she took the box from my arms and set it on the kitchen counter. "How bad was it?" she asked. I told her. When I reached the part where Grant said I lacked executive presence but wanted me to train Evan, she stared at me. So, you were qualified enough to teach the director how to be director, but not qualified enough to be the director? I smiled. That was more or less the message. That is insane. It's common. She shook her head. Common and insane can be the same thing. That line stayed with me. Friday afternoon, we ordered Thai food, watched a terrible reality show, and I turned my phone completely off. Saturday, I went running. Sunday, I helped Tessa finish a presentation for one of her classes and updated my resume. I had savings. I had references. I had already spoken confidentially with 2 recruiters. For the first time in years, Sunday evening did not come with a knot in my stomach. I did not check weather maps. I did not monitor weekend dispatch. I did not text supervisors asking whether the old freezer compressor in Lenexa was still making that grinding sound. I had left clear documentation, and Northstar had a brand new senior director whose job description included responsibility for all of it. Just before bed, Tessa asked, "Do you feel guilty?" I answered too quickly. "No." She raised one eyebrow. "That means yes," I laughed. "A little." She sat on the edge of the couch and said, "Why? You didn't cause anything." I knew exactly what she meant, but the old instinct was still there. If something went wrong and I knew how to fix it, some part of me believed I was responsible for not fixing it. "I've spent a lot of years being the person who catches things before they hit the floor," I said. "It feels strange to let people catch their own problems." Tessa leaned back and said, "Maybe that's how they learn they have hands." I slept better that night than I had in months. Monday morning at 7:12, I plugged my phone into the charger and turned it on. The screen froze for several seconds as messages loaded. 67 missed calls, 23 texts, 4 voicemails from Grant, 3 from Evan, 2 from a vice president I had only met twice, 1 from our company president, Marjorie Lane. I stared at the number for a moment, then opened the messages in order. Friday evening, nothing urgent. Saturday morning, a maintenance issue at our Omaha cold storage facility. Saturday afternoon, freezing rain across eastern Nebraska and western Iowa. Saturday night, a transformer failure near our secondary warehouse outside Council Bluffs. Sunday morning, the emergency generators at Omaha began dropping load because someone had postponed a fuel service contract I had flagged twice in the previous month. By Sunday afternoon, Northstar had 2 facilities operating at reduced power while a winter storm shut down sections of Interstate 29. That alone was serious but manageable. We had planned for almost exactly that scenario. The emergency playbook I had attached Friday contained a rerouting sequence that moved high-risk refrigerated inventory to Kansas City and contracted temporary cold trailers from 3 vendors with after-hours agreements already negotiated. It also prioritized hospital and school district deliveries over lower-risk restaurant orders, then staggered grocery shipments based on shelf life. I had built the protocol after a smaller outage 18 months earlier. Evan's first decision, according to the texts, was not to activate it because he believed diverting trucks would create bad optics with clients. His second decision was to override the warehouse supervisors and wait for normal power restoration. His third was to assure Summit Market Group that everything was under control. By the time he changed his mind, the backup cold trailers had been rented by other companies dealing with the same storm. Summit's Sunday produce and dairy loads missed their windows. 2 hospitals called because scheduled deliveries of refrigerated nutritional products had not arrived. Drivers were waiting for new assignments, but corporate had told dispatchers not to move without Evan's approval. I listened to Grant's first voicemail. His voice was controlled. "Maya, call me when you get this. We need to clarify a few items in your continuity file." The second came 4 hours later. "Maya, this situation is developing quickly. Evan needs context on the vendor escalation tree. Please call as soon as possible." The third came Sunday night, and the control was gone. "Maya, pick up. Summit is threatening suspension. We need you to walk Evan through the storm protocol." The fourth simply said, "Please call me." I did not feel triumphant. Not at first. I felt angry that people I respected were dealing with a preventable crisis. I worried about the warehouse teams. I worried about drivers on icy roads. I worried about hospital shipments because those were not abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. That was the difference between revenge fantasy and real life. Innocent people were always standing somewhere near the consequences. So I called the Omaha warehouse supervisor, Denise Carter, on her personal number. Denise had worked there for 12 years and had trained me when I was new. "Are you okay?" I asked. She sounded exhausted. "We're safe. Inventories still within temperature, barely. Your boy Evan finally authorized transfers at 4 this morning. He's not my boy." She laughed without humor. "Good answer." I asked about the drivers, then told her, "I can't give instructions. I don't work there anymore, but everything we built is in the continuity binder, including the vendor sequence." Denise said, "I know. I told him that 12 hours ago." That sentence told me everything. The problem was not missing knowledge. The problem was authority combined with arrogance. Evan had the information. He had simply believed his instincts were more important than the system built by people with experience. A few minutes later, Marjorie Lane called again. This time I answered. "Maya," she said, "I'm glad you picked up." Marjorie was in her early 60s, precise, and not known for wasting words. "I understand you resigned Friday." "I did. I also understand you provided a full handoff." "Yes." "Then I'm not calling to accuse you of anything. I'm calling because we have a serious operational issue, and I need to know whether there is anything material that was not included in the handoff." I appreciated the way she phrased it. "No," I said. "The storm protocol is complete. The vendor escalation tree is in Appendix C. There's also a priority matrix for medical and school accounts." There was a pause. "Evan says the documents are too theoretical to implement without you. They were implemented twice last winter by warehouse supervisors without me." Another pause. Longer this time. "Would you be willing to join a video call for 1 hour as a paid consultant?" That was different. She was not demanding. She was asking professionally. I agreed on one condition. The call would be limited to explaining the existing documents, not taking control of operations. Marjorie agreed immediately. At 9, I joined a video meeting with Marjorie, Grant, Evan, the 3 warehouse supervisors, legal counsel, and 2 vice presidents. Evan looked like he had not slept. Grant looked furious, but not at me. Marjorie said, "Maya, please walk us through the emergency sequence." I opened my own copy of the playbook and spent 28 minutes explaining a process I had documented in plain English. At one point, Evan interrupted. "That's not how I interpreted Step 4. Denise spoke before I could. "It says, do not delay diversion while waiting for utility restoration. That is literally the sentence." No one said anything for a few seconds. I continued. When I finished, Marjorie thanked me and asked the supervisors to remain on the call. Grant said, "Maya, wait." I stayed. He leaned toward the camera. "We may need additional assistance over the next few days. Then you should work through HR and send me a consulting agreement," I said. "I'm not returning as an employee." His jaw tightened. "This is bigger than the promotion." "I agree," I said, "which is why the person you promoted should be leading." Then I left the call. By Tuesday afternoon, Northstar had stabilized the warehouses, but the larger problem was no longer weather. It was trust. Summit Market Group had suspended new expansion orders pending a review. A hospital network requested a formal explanation. The board wanted to know why an established emergency process had been ignored. I was at a coffee shop meeting a recruiter when I received a message from a woman named Leah Bowers, Northstar's former director of human resources. Leah had retired 6 months earlier. She wrote, "I heard you left. If you're willing, I think there are a few things you should know." I almost ignored it. I was tired of Northstar occupying space in my head, but Leah had always been direct with me. And curiosity won. We met that evening at a small Italian restaurant near Brookside. She ordered tea, waited until the server walked away, and said, "Did Grant tell you the promotion committee chose Evan?" "He implied it." Leah shook her head. "The committee ranked you first." I did not answer. She continued, You were first with 4 of 5 reviewers. Evan was third. The room suddenly felt quieter. Then how did he get it? Grant changed the recommendation after the committee completed scoring. He told Marjorie that you were indispensable in your current role and that moving you would create operational risk. I laughed once because the logic was so ugly it was almost elegant, so I was too valuable to promote. That was part of it. What was the other part? Leah pulled a folder from her bag. She did not hand it to me. I'm not giving you confidential records. I am telling you what I personally observed before I retired. Evan had been positioning himself for that role for months. He attached his name to projects you created. Grant allowed it. In at least 2 leadership presentations, material from your continuity plan appeared under Evan's name. I thought about every late night I had spent formatting those procedures so exhausted supervisors could use them during emergencies. Why are you telling me now? Leah looked at me carefully. Because I told myself for years that if good people worked hard enough, the system would eventually correct itself. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes someone has to leave before anyone asks why. That was when the anger finally arrived. Not hot anger, clean anger. The kind that sharpens instead of blinding. I did not want Northstar destroyed. I did not want Grant humiliated in public or Evan dragged out by security. I wanted the truth recorded where it could no longer be repackaged as attitude, timing, or executive presence. Leah suggested I document my experience while everything was fresh. That night, I wrote a factual timeline. Dates, meetings, projects, emails, performance reviews. Times I had been asked to train Evan. Times he had presented material I created. Times Grant told me I was being groomed for promotion. I sent the document to myself and did nothing else with it. The next morning, Northstar's legal counsel called and requested a meeting on Thursday. I asked whether it concerned my resignation or my consulting call. He said, both, and the promotion process. I agreed. Thursday morning, I walked into Northstar for the first time since quitting. The lobby felt smaller than I remembered. My old badge no longer worked, so a receptionist printed a visitor sticker with my name on it. There was something strangely satisfying about that. I did not belong there anymore, and the building knew it. The meeting included Marjorie, 2 board members, legal counsel, Grant, Evan, and an external HR investigator. I had not requested an investigation. Apparently the board had. Marjorie opened by saying, Maya, we're reviewing both the operational response and the senior director selection. We would like you to answer questions. You are not required to participate. I'll answer factual questions, I said. The investigator began with the promotion timeline. I explained what Grant had told me, what responsibilities I had already been performing, and what I had been asked to continue doing under Evan. Then she asked, were you told why you were not selected? I repeated the phrases, executive presence and natural leadership. Grant shifted in his chair. The investigator looked at him. Mr. Hollis, your written evaluation of Miss Curie. Ellis 3 months earlier states, Maya is the strongest operational leader in the region and the person teams naturally look to under pressure. How do you reconcile that with your selection rationale? Grant's face changed. Evan stared at the table. For the first time, I understood why documentation mattered. Memory could be dismissed as emotion. Their own words could not. The investigator moved to project attribution. She displayed a slide from a leadership meeting showing Evan's name beneath a chart I had built from warehouse incident data. Who created this? She asked. I did, I said. Who presented it? Evan. Were you credited? Not on that slide. She brought up another. My routing capacity model. Evan's name. Another. My contingency staffing matrix. Evan's name. Evan finally said. These were team efforts. Denise, who had joined remotely, answered from the screen. No, they weren't. I looked at her image and almost smiled. The investigator asked Evan how he had decided not to activate the storm protocol Saturday. He gave a long answer about client confidence, decentralized decision-making, and avoiding unnecessary disruption. Marjorie interrupted him. Did you read the protocol before deciding? Evan hesitated. I reviewed the executive summary. Denise said, the warning you ignored is on page 2. That was the turning point. Not because everyone suddenly admired me, but because the room stopped treating the failure as an unfortunate storm response and started seeing the pattern underneath it. People had promoted presentation over competence, then expected competence to remain standing beside presentation forever, quietly preventing consequences. The board recessed for nearly an hour. I sat in an empty conference room with a cup of terrible coffee and watched sleet strike the windows. When Marjorie returned, she came alone. She closed the door and sat across from me. Grant has been placed on administrative leave pending the conclusion of the investigation, she said. I nodded. Evan? Removed from regional operations effective immediately. He will remain employed while HR completes its review. I appreciated that. Real companies did not usually transform into courtroom dramas in a single afternoon. People were investigated. Decisions took time. Consequences came through procedures, not speeches. Marjorie folded her hands. The board would like to offer you the senior director position. I had expected the possibility and still felt something twist in my chest when I heard it. For 6 years, I had wanted those words. I had pictured what I would say. I had imagined calling my mother, buying a better apartment, seeing my name on the office door. Now that the offer was real, it felt like being handed a ticket to a train I no longer wanted to board. I appreciate that, I said. But no, Marjorie studied me. May I ask why? Because if I come back now, everyone gets to tell themselves the system worked. It didn't. I had to resign during a leadership transition and a regional emergency before anyone asked why the person doing the work wasn't the person being promoted. She did not argue. Fair. And I don't want to spend the next 2 years wondering whether every opportunity is genuine or just damage control. She looked down at the table, then back at me. What would make you reconsider? Nothing today. I expected disappointment. Instead, she nodded. Then I hope wherever you go understands what they're getting. I stood to leave, but before I reached the door, she said, Maya, for what it's worth, I should have looked closer. I turned around. For what it's worth, I should have spoken sooner. That was the first time I said it out loud. Grant and Evan had made their choices, but I had made choices too. Every time someone asked me to rescue a project without credit, I had done it. Every time a deadline required someone to sacrifice a weekend, I volunteered. Every time I heard, we'll take care of you next cycle, I accepted the promise because challenging it felt less comfortable than carrying the load. They had taken advantage of me, yes, but I had spent years teaching people that I would absorb the cost. Leaving was not the day I became strong. I had always been strong. Leaving was the day I stopped using my strength exclusively for everyone else. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered. I heard about the storm, she said. Your father says Grant might lose his job. Maybe. And Northstar offered you the promotion? I wondered who had told her. Probably Grant. Probably my father. Probably the same strange network through which people who never called to congratulate me somehow always found time to discuss my decisions. Yes, thank goodness. So you're going back? No. The silence that followed was longer than the first time I had told her no. Maya, why would you refuse now? You proved your point. I stepped out of the elevator into the lobby. That's exactly why. I don't understand. I know. You're walking away from everything you worked for. I looked through the glass doors at the parking lot beyond them, gray sky above wet pavement. No, Mom. I'm taking what I worked for with me. She started to argue, but I stopped her gently. You always told me strong people don't need applause. I believed you. The problem is, I turned that into permission for everyone to give me responsibility without recognition. I'm done doing that. Her voice softened. I only wanted you to be secure. I know, but secure and stuck are not the same thing. We ended the call without resolving everything. That mattered to me. I used to think every conversation had to end with agreement or I had failed to explain myself. Now I understood that sometimes a boundary was complete even when the other person disliked it. 6 weeks later, I started as Director of Network Resilience for a national medical supply distributor headquartered in Denver. The title sounded impressive, but what mattered more was the first conversation I had with my new boss, a woman named Rachel Kim. During my final interview, she slid a crisis response proposal across the table and said, "You've built systems like this before. Tell me what you think is wrong with ours." I spent 40 minutes telling her. I expected her to defend it. Instead, she took notes. Then she asked, "What resources would you need to fix it?" That question almost made me emotional because it was so simple. Not, "Can you handle this on top of your current job?" Not, "Can you help someone else look successful?" Just, "What do you need to do the work well?" Northstar did not collapse after I left. It lost part of the summit expansion, paid penalties on several missed deliveries, and spent months rebuilding trust. Grant eventually resigned after the investigation concluded that he had manipulated the promotion process and allowed repeated misattribution of work. Evan remained with the company, but was moved into an individual planning role without direct operational authority. Denise was promoted to regional warehouse director, which made me happier than anything else that happened. When she called to tell me, she said, "Apparently I have executive presence now." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. My mother still occasionally introduced my decision to relatives as the time Maya almost threw away her career. But even she stopped telling me I should have stayed after she visited me in Denver and saw that I was not sitting around regretting Northstar. Tessa came for spring break. One evening, we were eating takeout on the balcony of my new apartment when she told me she had turned down an unpaid leadership role in a campus organization because they wanted her to do the work while someone else kept the title. "I thought of you," she said. "I told them if they wanted me responsible for the outcome, they could make me responsible on paper too." I smiled. "How did that go?" "They magically found a title." We both laughed, but then she became serious. "I used to think being dependable meant never letting anybody struggle if you could help." I looked at my younger sister and saw a version of myself I wanted to spare from learning the lesson the expensive way. "Being dependable means people can trust your word," I told her. "It doesn't mean they get unlimited access to your time, your work, or your future." She nodded, and for a while we sat there watching traffic move below us. I sometimes wondered what would have happened if Grant had promoted me in the first place. I probably would have stayed. I would have kept solving emergencies, covering gaps, answering calls at midnight, and congratulating myself for being indispensable. That was the strange gift inside the insult. Being told I was not leadership material forced me to see that I had built my identity around being useful to people who benefited from keeping me one step below where I belonged. The 67 missed calls were satisfying for about 10 minutes. The investigation was satisfying for a little longer. Watching the people who underestimated me face consequences felt good because justice usually does, but none of those things became the part I remembered most. What stayed with me was that Friday afternoon when I drove home with my phone silent and realized the world had not ended because I stopped holding everything together. Other people had hands. Other people had titles. Other people had salaries. They could carry what belonged to them. And I could finally carry my own life.